If someone in the early 1990s had said that one of the most radical supercars of the decade would come not from Italy, Japan, or Britain, but from quiet Switzerland, it would have sounded like a joke. And yet the Monteverdi High 650 F1 was exactly that kind of car. A Swiss shark with a real Formula One engine, a carbon fiber monocoque, a weight of around 850 kilograms, and a claimed output of up to 650 horsepower. This was not just a racing-inspired supercar. It was an attempt to place Grand Prix technology inside the body of a car for an extremely wealthy customer, even before the Ferrari F50 began telling the world about its Formula One connections. The Monteverdi High 650 F1 was meant to be something between a race car, a track prototype, and an extreme road machine. It was supposed to accelerate to 100 kilometers per hour in around 3 seconds, pass 200 kilometers per hour in just 8 seconds, and reach about 335 kilometers per hour. It sounded like science fiction, but behind the project stood a man who spent his life doing things his own way. Peter Monteverdi. Only 3 examples were built, and only one is considered a fully functional car. That is exactly why the High 650 F1 remains one of the most mysterious, rarest, and most underrated machines of the 1990s. The story of this car begins long before 1992. Peter Monteverdi was one of the most fascinating figures in Swiss automotive history. He was born into a family connected with car repair and car sales, and as a young man, he was already building his own racing machines. In the 1950s, he took over the family business and later became an important luxury car dealer in Switzerland. He sold brands such as Ferrari, BMW, and Lancia, and for a time, his relationship with Enzo Ferrari gave him a very strong position on the local market. According to the famous story, their relationship collapsed when Ferrari demanded advance payment for a large batch of cars. Monteverdi saw it as an insult, ended the cooperation, and decided to build cars under his own name. This is how the Monteverdi brand was born, offering powerful, luxurious, and highly exclusive Grand Tours from the late 1960s onward. The formula was simple but effective: European style, hand-built bodies, and powerful American Chrysler engines. Monteverdi did not want to copy Ferrari. He wanted to create cars for customers who wanted power, comfort, air conditioning, automatic transmissions, and luxury, but without Italian drama, and without begging for a place in the queue. The most legendary name in the history of the brand was High, which means shark in German. It first appeared in 1970 on the High 450 SS. That car was an extreme mid-engined coupe with a huge Chrysler Hemi V8 behind the driver. It was meant to compete with the Lamborghini Miura and the De Tomaso Pantera, but from the very beginning, it was surrounded by mystery. Monteverdi claimed that more than a dozen examples had been built, but historians and collectors usually give much lower numbers, often speaking of only a few cars. So the High 450 SS became more than just a car. It became a myth, a display of ambition, and a sign that a small Swiss company could challenge the biggest names. 20 years later, Peter Monteverdi decided to bring the name back. This time, however, he did not want to build another Grand Tourer with an American engine. He wanted something far more radical, a car that would not only refer to Formula One, but actually use its components. That is how the idea of the Monteverdi High 650 F1 was born, the successor to the old Shark, but created not by the rules of the 1970s, rather by the obsessive logic of the early carbon fiber supercar era. The key moment was Monteverdi's adventure in Formula One. At the end of the 1980s, he bought the financially struggling Onyx Grand Prix team and moved its operations to Switzerland. The racing project did not last long and did not bring major success. Its best result was just outside the points, and after a short run, the team disappeared from the grid. But for Monteverdi, something extremely valuable remained: technical knowledge, people, documentation, experience with carbon fiber structures, and parts from real Grand Prix cars. Among them were Ford Cosworth DFR V8 engines, the final evolution of the famous DFV family, one of the most important engine families in Formula One history. Under normal circumstances, a small manufacturer would never have had access to such components. Monteverdi had them literally within reach. That was when the idea appeared to build a car that would be more than a supercar. It was meant to be an F1 car with 2 seats and a closed body. It did not have to be practical. It did not have to be comfortable. It had to be brutally fast, extreme, and technically fascinating. That is why the name, High 650 F1, was not just a marketing decoration. It truly described the character of the car. The basis of the construction was a carbon fiber monocoque, inspired by, or directly derived from, the technology of the Monteverdi Onyx team. Unlike many supercars of the era, which only boasted about racing inspiration, the High 650 F1 used its engine and gearbox as structural elements. This meant that the power unit and transmission were not simply bolted into a frame, but formed part of the car's structure, just like in Formula One cars. The suspension used a racing-style pushrod layout with long carbon fiber wishbones, while braking was handled by AP racing brakes, described in some sources as carbon ceramic or directly inspired by Grand Prix systems. The body was made from a mixture of carbon fiber, fiberglass, Kevlar, and epoxy resins. The whole car was supposed to weigh around 850 kilograms, less than many small hot hatchbacks, while producing more power than a Ferrari F40, Lamborghini Diablo, or Bugatti EB110 GT. The car was about 4.5 meters long, almost 2 meters wide, and only around 1 meter and 5 centimeters tall. This was not the shape of a classic Grand Tourer. It was a wedge glued to the road. At the heart of the Monteverdi High 650 F1 was a 3.5-liter Ford Cosworth DFR V8 engine. It was a real Formula One engine, not a road engine styled to seem racing-derived. Depending on the source, output is quoted from around 575 to 650 horsepower, with the name 650 F1 referring to the claimed target output. The engine was said to rev to around 11,000 revolutions per minute, while some descriptions mention a maximum of up to 13,000. For a road-oriented car from the early 1990s, that was absolutely insane. Torque was not huge compared with large turbocharged engines, but that was not the point. The point was instant response, low weight, and pure racing character. The unit weighed around 155 kilograms and was connected to a 6-speed manual gearbox. Power went to the rear wheels. At a time when supercar manufacturers were only beginning to experiment with active electronics, Monteverdi went toward directness. The driver was supposed to sit extremely low, with a screaming Formula One V8 behind his back, driving a car that felt more like a track prototype than a luxury road vehicle. The performance figures sounded like something from a bedroom poster. Acceleration from 0 to 100 kilometers per hour was said to take around 3 seconds, and 0 to 200 kilometers per hour only around 8 seconds. The claimed top speed was around 335 kilometers per hour, or about 208 miles per hour. In 1992, those numbers were at the very top of the world. The McLaren F1 was still coming. The Ferrari F50 appeared later, and the Porsche 959 and Ferrari F40 already belonged to the previous wave of supercars. In terms of power-to-weight ratio, the High 650 F1 was almost absurd. With 850 kilograms and up to 650 horsepower, it delivered a figure that still impresses today. Many comparisons point out that this power-to-weight ratio was better than in later hybrid hypercars, such as the LaFerrari or McLaren P1. Of course, it is important to remember that many of Monteverdi's figures remained manufacturer claims, and the car never went through a full program of independent road testing. Even so, the concept itself was extreme. Low weight, A real F1 engine, a carbon structure, and performance capable of embarrassing almost any rival of its era. The styling of the high 650 F1 was dictated by engineering. The body did not try to be classically beautiful like a Ferrari or theatrical like a Lamborghini. It was low, wide, smooth, and slightly strange, with a sharply cut rear end, a large glazed area over the engine, and a tail shaped around the diffuser, radiators, and air channels. From the rear, it was especially clear that this was not an ordinary coupe. The wide carbon fiber diffuser, large cooling intakes, and visible drivetrain components revealed the car's racing origins. After removing the rear cover, you could see the Cosworth engine with 8 individual intake trumpets, the gearbox, and suspension elements resembling those of a Formula One car. The body design is credited to Klaus Frenzel, who was a very young designer at the time, and later became connected with Daimler. The car looked like a vision of the future, seen through the eyes of the early 1990s. Less elegant than the McLaren F1, less dramatic than the Lamborghini Diablo, but more mechanical, more direct, and more shamelessly race car-like. The interior was very simple, because the high 650 F1 was not meant to be a luxury grand tourer in the old Monteverdi style. The cabin was tight, raw, and focused on low weight. Instead of wood, thick carpets, and comfortable seats, there were 2 racing bucket seats, harnesses, and a minimal amount of equipment. This car was closer to a track day machine than a road coupe for highway travel. Some materials suggested that the manufacturer would also offer a less powerful engine version intended more for road use, but in practice it is difficult to speak of a real production version. The high 650 F1 never received full road homologation in Europe, and its character was so extreme that even very wealthy customers would have had to accept compromises known from true racing cars. This was the heart of the project's problem. Monteverdi was ahead of his time, because today, track-focused hypercars with no homologation or very limited homologation do not surprise anyone. In the 1990s, the market was not yet ready for a Swiss car costing enormous money, which in practice was a Formula One car with a body. The plan assumed very limited production. Most sources mention 12 examples, and the price was supposed to be around 850,000 Swiss francs. That was an enormous amount, higher than the price of a Ferrari F40 and close to the level later represented by the McLaren F1. Monteverdi reportedly gathered some interest and accepted deposits, but no car ever reached a normal customer. The reasons were typical for such extreme projects: costs, logistics, homologation, limited production capability, a lack of stable backing, and a supercar market that had entered a more difficult period after the speculative madness of the 1980s. In the end, only 3 examples were built. According to the most commonly repeated version, these were 2 red cars and 1 silver-purple show car without an engine. Some sources say that only 1 car is fully functional, while the others are prototypes or display mock-ups. Importantly, one of the running cars appeared publicly years later, including during Monterey Car Week and the Quail, reminding the world that this car really exists. The fate of these cars is just as interesting as their construction. 2 examples are linked with Swiss museum collections, including the Transport Museum in Lucerne or the former Monteverdi Museum, while the best-known functional red example is in private hands and has been shown by collector car specialists. According to reports from 2021, the car had run for only a few hours, still wore its original Pirelli P0 tires, and spent most of its life as a display object rather than a car used for driving. That makes its value extremely difficult to estimate. There is no normal market for the Monteverdi High 650 F1 because there are no comparable sales. One can only estimate. Considering its original price of around 850,000 Swiss francs, its extreme rarity, its Formula One engine, the history of the brand, and the current interest in 1990s hypercars, a running example could today be worth at least several $1 million. A cautious range would be around $2 to $5 million, but with the right auction and a strong collector narrative, the price could go higher. At the same time, it must be said honestly that this is not a confirmed transaction value, but an estimate for a one-off or practically unique prototype. The Monteverdi High 650 F1 was Peter Monteverdi's last great act. He did not build a series. He did not threaten the McLaren F1. He did not create a new era of Swiss hypercars, but he created something that years later feels almost prophetic. Today, manufacturers eagerly build limited track cars with racing technology, carbon fiber monocoques, extreme power-to-weight ratios, and prices counted in millions. Monteverdi tried to do it already in 1992, using real Formula One components. The High 650 F1 was too expensive, too complicated, and too uncompromising for its time. But that is exactly why it is so fascinating. It is a car that proves automotive history is not made only of models that succeeded. Sometimes the most interesting ones are those that almost made it. The Swiss Shark never reached open waters, but it remained one of the most radical supercars of its era, a machine in which the dream of a road-going Formula One car was more literal than almost anywhere else.